Hello, hello. Good evening, good evening. We'll wait a little bit to see if we get some people on live for a bit. Super excited to discuss these generational dynamics tonight. It's a very big deal, a very big deal. So we'll wait a few moments to check in and see what's going on. Hi, Tamaya. Thank you. Hey. All right, for people on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, we're just waiting maybe about another minute before we get started on these generational dynamics. There's a lot to say, definitely a lot to say. So we're about to get started in just a bit. Definitely a lot to say because there's a lot of shenanigans and things happening that do not have to happen. Right? If people just feel their awareness, they were just a little more aware when they were interacting with certain people. That's all. That's all. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, first of all, we know that it's 2023, we're rolling and everything very well now. And uh, just in conversation this week, a lot of people said last week still felt kind of iffy. There was like a slow emergence, still trying to get out of the season, right? But this week has definitely been a lot more settled, and we're in the cruise now. We're rolling. We're halfway through January, pretty much in 2023. So if you're tuning in, please do make sure to say hello. Right? I know Tamaya already said hello over here in IG World, but let us know. Let us know where you're checking in from, and we want to be clear and just really impressed that this social emotional agility that we work on, we emphasize, we challenge, and we try to model is an ongoing process. It's a practice. So it's not going to be, okay, let me watch a couple of videos and I'm 100% good. It's a daily thing. So the more that we know, the more we can actually practice it. But it is a practice. the different generations, I must say. Okay. Hey, hey, Mufalada Love. Thank you for tuning in. So, my quick question to you all first is, how many generations are in the workplace? Right? It's 2023. If you had to guess, how many generations are in the workplace today? Put your guess in the comments, please. How many generations are there in the workplace? How many do you think? I'm gonna give y'all some think time. Okay, so it's Princess T said there's 5. Let's see. Any other guesses? How many generations are in the workplace? Okay. Okay. Princess T switched it to 3. Mufalada Love said 4. Okay. So I'm gonna hold that thought for just a minute. Y'all hold that thought, okay? So we're talking about how many generations are actually in the workplace. And then we're asking first about the workplace because we're going to talk about all the generations that there actually are, but we're going to talk about the ones actually in the workplace first. So, with that being said, there's actually 5. There's 5 generations. Princess T, you had it right the first time. There's 5 generations actually in the workforce. And remember, the technical full-time workforce age being 18 for most people. So we'll talk about that because when we talk about adulthood, the workplace, y'all know how I feel about 18 being the technical age for adulthood. If you've caught any of our previous lives, you know how and why I feel about that, right? But we really wanted to pull together some specific recent data for you all about the generations, their dynamics, working together, just especially post COVID, right? Because some things have adjusted since then, and just they really aren't thought of. It seems like as much when people do these generational studies. They really don't talk as much about the silent generation. And I'm gonna talk a little more about that in a minute. But they're also sometimes called the traditionalists. So these members are born from about 1925 to 1945, right? And so many people sometimes, again, forget about them, but for today's workspaces, a lot of these members may belong to, they might be founders or definitely sit on some type of executive or advisory board. They're different chairpersons, but like the very tip top of that C-suite level, or immediately outside of it, especially for those blue chip type organizations. So they're there. They're there. Right. So we should act like, that they don't exist. So again, I'm still trying to figure out and learn some more myself about why they're called the silent generation, quote unquote. Because we know some things, but again, we haven't said as much. And I wanted to take a little more time and say a bit more for that very fact, because it shouldn't be a mystery. Again, we're trying to make sure that we demystify a lot of the dynamics and elements surrounding the different generations working together. So, for a bit of context, well, first, sometimes what happens is, and what I found is, when people refer to someone that may actually be a part of the silent generation, they may misclassify them as a baby boomer. So that happened a lot. So the more that people really dig deep and sort it out, they see that they are definitely two distinct groups. They're definitely separate, but they are often misclassified as boomers. So just like the bad habit I'm gonna say that some people have of thinking people that seem younger or are younger than you in different spaces, you say, oh, these millennials, but not everyone younger or not the youngest people are millennials, right? It's a different generation, which we'll get to in a minute. So often what happens is if someone is kind of in the middle or they're super young, if someone is older or they perceive them to be much older, they'll say, oh, these boomers, but they could be a part of the silent generation actually instead. So that misconception goes both ways. So for some context, really quickly, Barbara Walters, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Anne Frank, right? All of these people are actually born in the same year. For context, now we know that Barbara Walters passed recently, right? And to be honest, all of them were actually born in 1929. So that's kind of towards the older silent generation folks. So sometimes when we act and interact as though we don't know anyone from the silent generation, shame on us. Shame on us, because even if they aren't technically members of the workforce anymore, again, they're still around because Barbara Walters, hey, cultivated connections, right? Barbara Walters had only retired about 7 years ago. And again, to think that she, Dr. King, and Anne Frank were all born in the same year and kind of at the top tier, right? They were older silent generation members, or sometimes called traditionalists. That's a big deal. So hopefully one of the takeaways from this, highlighting this generation, is we know not to think that that generation doesn't exist, right? Princess T said they weren't even silent, right? The irony. But again, a lot of times the middle age, younger, anyone older, or you're a boomer. Nope, not everybody's a boomer, right? So just like not everybody younger is a millennial. So again, we're gonna demystify some things today. Cultivated Connection said, I thought so. I was like, she was still working here very recently. Again, it was within 7, so that was full-time work. They will call her to do all kind of things often for Barbara Walters. So very true, very true. Yeah, so that's one generation. We said there's 5, so let's go. Next, baby boomers, right? So a lot of people have seen the memes where, okay, boomer, right? And all these jokes, which again, a lot of those jokes and memes were probably misplaced. You probably were talking about someone from the silent generation, the super tip top C-suite level founders, those things. But the technical year range that they're given is about 1946 to 1964, right? So again, we're going to continue to focus on that point of view, right? Where a lot of those memes came from, where someone might be older, they're a boomer. We're gonna talk more specifically about the boomers. Say more, will do in just a minute. The point of view that we're going to be emphasizing is that much like our post from yesterday, where Gertrude Stein said that each generation is focusing on something differently. I mean, let's start there, right? When we're thinking about workplaces, when we're thinking about leadership styles, when we're thinking about communication, when we're thinking about just life period, away from work, right? Each generation has, again, its own set of motivations, its own set of things that's important to them. So a lot to discuss when we talk about these generations. Okay, Cultivated Connection said her grannies was born in 1946. Right. So that's the very beginning of the baby boomers, according to this, right? Because sometimes the year ranges vary a bit, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment too. So let me say this. Let me pause and say, please drop a flower in the comments, and that'll represent our growing perspective, right, in 2023, as we're outlining some things this evening. So if some of the things are already growing your perspective, please feel free to drop a flower in the comments as we roll. All right, Generation X, 1965 about to 1980. So sometimes this generation was referred to as the latchkey generation. Okay. So I see Princess T, Cultivated Connections. Thank y'all for dropping your flowers, right? Again, to represent the perspective that we're growing, our growing perspective. Yeah, Generation Z. So they really had a strong sense of independence, right? Again, going back to being latchkey, quote unquote. And arguably, a lot of creativity came out of that. And I know Cultivated Connections can appreciate that, right? As maybe the only parent or both parents were at work in their home. So they were home, they had to entertain themselves and be responsible for themselves quite a chunk. So there came some independence. So what came with that is some independence and obviously some creativity, right? Um, so a particular story I have with a Generation X principal. When I was in the school system, I had a principal who he seemed really proud to see like the next wave, right? The next wave of educators, because it was somewhat reminiscent for him. Because when you think about it, well, in terms of the Industrial Revolution and things, Gen X was the next wave, like post industrial revolution, right? They were about 20 years later. So he was really excited to see this little flow, this crew come through. And he was like, y'all are bringing new energy, new ideas, right? And just being able to relate to youth and overlap some interests. Hey, hey, Teach Me D. Hi, thank you for joining. Now, one of the things when in his excitement, he said, at one point, I remember that I was young. He said, I used to tell the kids, I used to tell the young people that I drink Pepsi. Now, just that quickly, he lost me. I did not understand what he meant, right? Because there was we were in two different generations. Imagine I was the next part of the next wave. He said, I was cool too. I told him I drank Pepsi. So then he had to go on to explain to me that, at one point in life, old people, quote unquote, older people drink Coke. And if you were young, cool, you drank the new drink, the new cola, which was Pepsi. So that was part of his conversation when he was relating to the youth, when he was a teacher before matriculating through to be a principal. So just a moment though, because again, a lot of those parallels, Gen X really wanted to kind of connect, right? As they were working with other people and other generations, they seemed to really focus on wanting to connect. Despite a lot of their independence, they understood and appreciated collaboration. But I often wondered about personally their entrance and acceptance into the workplace, what their experience was like. So that is the thing, right? Eventually doing some more research on that, even if it's direct research, and asking more questions about what their assimilation will, their onboarding, right? We call it now, what their onboarding experience was like. So Cultivated Connection says, reminds me of the Sprite remix era. Right. That's going to be a very specific moment in time, because there is a huge chunk, true enough, a huge chunk of people that any occasion they're choosing Sprite or the remix Sprites, right? When that was a thing. Seriously. Seriously. Very true. So then the next generation is Gen Y. And this is a bit, so Gen Y is the technical name, but most people are more familiar with like the nickname of millennials, right? So millennials are technically, some say, and there's a lot of different age range or year range definitions for millennials, and I'll tell you why in a minute, from 1981 to about 1994. And if you're keeping track, remember this is the fourth generation we're emphasizing. But Tamaya did guess earlier, Princess T guessed earlier, that there are actually five. So we're not all the way there yet to the end of all the generations in the workplace. So we have a press release. So we're going to say that again because we need to lean over and say it. That again, not everyone that seems young or maybe younger than you is a millennial, right? So I had to read it both ways. Just like I said, someone that's older than you, not all the people older than you are part of boomers. They may be a part of the traditionalist or silent generation. Okay. All right. All right. We got it now. I think we got it. Okay. So I know some people might be shocked at that thought, but again, we just need to be clear about it, super clear. The last group that's actually in the workforce Generation Z. So super excited to share this because at one point I remember having a conversation with some of my young people, and they were literally saying, "Well, Miss Jones, if we're Generation Z, what comes next? Is that it? What comes next?" But the Z didn't have as much to do with the alphabet, but they nicknamed them the Zoomers. Right? It's for Generation Zoomer because a lot of people again had questions about that. So this really because of the speed of the evolution and accessibility of technology. Things were moving faster. They were zooming, y'all. Haha, right? And they had those experiences so early in their life that that's just what they had become used to. So they were part of the zoom of the evolution again of technology, etc. So a couple things to think about, a couple of examples. Think about how quickly we went from digital cameras to very effective smartphone cameras, right? Camera phones. It was quick. Like I can personally go through and remember all the different waves of phones, but that time between, again, from having a digital camera until people were not buying digital cameras anymore and only taking photos on their phone, it wasn't that much time. Not that much time passed. And again, this was Gen Z's experience largely, the older ones, especially growing up. So then speaking of phones, listen, for phones, these smartphone generations became really outrageous, if we're gonna be honest about it. It went from about 2.5 years, or maybe a little more, to about every 6 months, there was an updated version, a new release, right? So tell me I'm telling the truth. Am I telling the truth? Phones were coming out about every 6 months on the same brand of phone and everything, maybe with a plus behind it. And just listen, Cultivated Connection says, remember it like yesterday, digital cameras with the tiny little screens. Yes. So actually, Cultivated Connections, look, one of my younger cousins, y'all heard me talk about my family. I have lots and lots of cousins. One of my cousins, I remember kind of etching that in my mind when she was about 5. She's 17 now. Took a picture and she immediately grabbed my digital camera to turn around and look at that little screen. And I was like, wow, because that's the thing. That's what she's going to know in her life. Like I remember marking that in my mind, that's what she was going to know. All right, Cultivated Connection said facts. It's Princess T said they just added more cameras. They did. They did. That was a whole nother thing. So as we talk about the Zoom part, right? Even on the camera phones, it went from the one to now there's 3 plus the one on the front. It's a lot of different camera lenses for sure. Then even if we look at Gen Z's experience in terms of sports and competition, there was a record number of new sports that entered not just recreation, but also professional level sports and Olympics. So again, a lot of things, they saw a lot of things kind of fast forward. So the Z is for Zoom, Zoomer, one more time. Okay, and speaking of Zoom, right, y'all know I'm kind of corny. Speaking of Zoom, another example that moved quickly in their lifetime was Zoom calls gave way to Spatial and Discord, which, again, ties in a lot of the AR, VR, Web3 technology, which for them is just a part of life. They're just moving through it largely. So the technology is zooming, and that has been their experience, their defined experience. The Zoomy babies. There you go. That's what the Z in Generation Z is for. Now, that's all of the adults, technically, everyone in the workforce, right? But those are not all of our generations. We still have our youngest generation, which, I'm really excited to learn more about them as they grow. The Alpha generation. So the Alpha young people were born in about 2010 and beyond. So this is kind of a pretty big deal for them. Because this year, since it's 2023, a lot of them are technically going to be teenagers this year, right? This will be 13. And again, kind of depending on how people feel about the years, 11. But the oldest Alpha young people are going to be 13 this year. That's a big deal. Y'all, let's move in. These generations are moving. So we have about six total generations, right? but 5 of them are in the workplace. Cultivated Connection said, wait, I'm a Zoomy baby, 1998. No, Zoomers were from about 1995 to 2009. I'm sorry, I don't think I gave the years. About 95 to 2009. And guess what the reality is? I'm trying to make sure that we're retraining ourselves to say the 19 again, because if we talked about the silent generation first and they started about 1925, it's about to be 25 again. So we can't just say 25 anymore. How about that? How about that? Okay. So these alpha young people, um, a lot of people, we really don't know as much, but a lot of people have definitely been describing them as kind of deep. Um, they have they're deep thinkers. Their consciousness is almost alarming at times. Like, why do you know that? Right? You're 6, you're 8, you're 10. How do you know? So sometimes it's almost alarming, but we have to realize though that their awareness and exposure rates, if you will, are extremely high, because they have access to media and constant information in every section, in every form of their life. Everything, right? Cultivated Connection said, okay, I was about to say, no, not a Zoomy baby, not a Zoomy baby. Very intuitive. Their emotional intelligence seems to be really high. It does. It really does. Um, let's see, what else I want to say about them? Well, you know what, pausing for a minute to say that, again, those year time frames, I know Cultivated Connections chief visionary strategist Tangerine, I know she got a little bit concerned for a minute, saying, wait now, I'm a Zoomy baby, go back and say those years, please, right? But for the years, and so I kind of give them for a frame of reference, because there's a lot of other things to consider, which really define how people demonstrate more so their generational norms, their generational trends, if you will. Birth order is important, right? If you're the oldest, if you're a younger kid, your proximity to the cusp, or you right on the edge before it became a new generation, right? That it could almost kind of flow either way, right? So if you're kind of on the cusp, but you hang with your older cousins, maybe you're in a multi-generational home, right? You spend a lot of time talking to your abuelita, to your grandmother, then yeah, yes, that's going to impact the actual tendencies that you have as an individual, despite kind of being defined to a specific generation. It's a number of things. Then also your evolution and the exposure again to technology. Because with that being said, what if I told you, Cultivated Connections Tangerine, that you're actually on the edge of what some people argue like this is a thing, and y'all know I nerd out about this. This is my jam. That this is a thing, that there's a micro generation that's in between a couple of the generations, and I love it. Okay. Cultivated Connection said that she's the oldest and raised by grandparents. So that definitely impacts your individual demonstrations, despite being a part of the millennials, right? Gen Y, right there on the edge. So let me say this. With that being in mind, the micro generation sometimes is called the bridge generation. And so these years, though, I almost hate to say some of the years, because these years have been all over the place. Some people have said, oh, it's about 1980 to 1990 to 1984. Other people have said it's 1978 to 1988. So what is more important and the biggest takeaway here is to really describe the characteristics, right? So again, y'all, I appreciate the feedback. Again, continue to drop some flowers. Anytime you hear something that's like, okay, my perspective grew, please do drop some flowers. Let me know. For this bridge generation, so it's the largest group. It's, again, the year span is the smallest, right? But it's the largest group after the baby boomers. We actually have our Facts Friday post tomorrow that breaks down the percentages of the different generations in the workforce, like who makes up what. right? Um, these bridge people had an analog childhood, people say. They had an analog childhood, but a digital coming of age and into adulthood. So they literally know and literally understand almost the world of yesteryear, right? They were there for a lot of it, for quite a lot of it. But then their coming of age experiences were layered with a lot of those technological bursts, right? Which shaped their very unique perspective and very, very unique view of the world, the current world. Because again, they knew, they played outside, like this group played outside, but also had video games, right? This group had to go to the library and use the Dewey Decimal System, right? But also had to start writing papers and researching using the internet when the internet became a thing. This group remembers maybe using the rotary phone at an older relative's house, but then also, had beepers, pagers, whatever you like to call it. Maybe remembers seeing movies or someone in their family having a car phone that turned into different size cell phones, right? So, and that is a very small window. Again, no more than 10 years. Some people even say as small as 4 years. That's it. That there's a small group that can actually look back and had a very strong experience, right? A very strong and specific connection to yesteryear. But then also the coming of age was layered with a lot of the technology pieces. All right, let's see these chats. Cultivated Connection said it's us. Yes, Dewey, right? AOL, yes. And Princess T said, and remember the generation that skipped a few things due to COVID. So that is, well, because of, I'm going to say this, because of both some members of Gen Z and Alpha generation being in the midst of their adolescence. Remember, adolescence is 10 to 25. Then it's impacting two. That's a great point, right? It's impacting really two generations. Tamaya, that was a great point. The rotary phone, right? Just so, yes, right? Cultivated Connection said, yes, memories, indeed. Indeed, right? We knew what it was like to have to save papers. Once we did use the computer using the floppy disk, right, for school, then now we love Google Drive, the Google Suite, because we remember those feelings of losing a paper, and it was not a good feeling at all. It was not a good thing. So some old school phrases, some phrases people say to describe this group some more, right? Again, just give us some criteria for you to connect with. That they may have an old school hard work ethic. They're good with surviving independently, but also it's mixed with a lot of tech savviness and sophistication, right? Because again, analog childhood, digital adolescence into adulthood. So this is the bridge generation. This is a bonus generation, if you will. This arguably mini group. They've had a hard hitting set of experiences before the age of 40. And we'll talk about that a little more another time, but just some very landmark things we're going to discuss really for each group. A lot of times when we talk about generations, besides describing characteristics, we like to look at what was one of the major historical events that kind of helped to shape and define some of their trends, some of their characteristics. So going back to what Tamaya said, what about COVID? We can imagine for some of the young people how much COVID is going to come up as a major impact. Yes, it impacted all generations, but again, because of a lot of the developmental things, that's going to be a very big deal. It's probably going to be one of their huge milestones that defines them. The Nokia phone, yes, just old souls. So, okay, some people are starting to name some of the events. Cultivated Connection said for them, 9/11. Again, because imagine Cultivated Connections, you're able to reference and remember where you were rather, for 9/11. But the people that we've been teaching, especially like Gen Z on down, they were born after that. Imagine that. Like they were born is literally a historical moment, literally, for them. It's something in the book, hopefully a parent talked about, because otherwise it's they don't have a connection to it fully. Cultivated Connection said the Columbine shooting. Mufalada Love said, I like it. The Bridge Generation, quite a spectrum. And again, so this is, I'm not going to say it's like super, that is super controversial, but one of the biggest points of contention when people do talk about the Bridge Generation, that little mini bonus generation, hey, Real Educator 8, hey, right, is that it's the span of the year. So anything from 10 at most to 4. Some people say, no, it was just about 4 years. So, but a lot happened in those 4 years. So, and if you tuned in again with us before, you know that we like to work in chunks. We like to give you some things that you can let marinate, right? Let it sit in your spirit a bit. And then, we'll put a pin in it here for tonight. So as we're building next week, because again, there's so much to discuss for these generational dynamics, tonight, in reality, all we've gone over so far are just some basic profiles. And these are some descriptors of these 6 different generations that are with us, but 5 generations that are in the workplace. That's all we've done, right? So what we're going to do next week is, again, we're going to emphasize the motivators, the values, and communication and workplace habits for each generation. That's what we're going to emphasize next week. So please do come join us again as we strive to do our part as members of the village and give some practical, some reflective strategies and have some good conversation that we can all use, right? My name is Anika S. Jones. Please do say the S. And I'm the lead consultant of Holistic Fluency, where we work to add value to individuals and organizations by building their relational capacity and emotional agility. Again, y'all, we want y'all to be ninjas. We want you to be smooth with it out here, right? Again, please do save this so you can refer back. If you have any questions regarding social emotional learning, how that impacts, again, the workplace, please do slide in our DMs. Y'all, we'll write you back, and often we'll answer the questions on a live as well. So please follow the account, tag some people, because again, these generational dynamics, y'all, these are going to be good. These are going to be really good. And again, we're talking to and about everybody, right? Thank you again for joining, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank y'all.